and we feel drunk. If you want my opinion, and even if you didn't want it, I strongly recommend you to do the Nitrox course. So what it is, first of all, I want to take back what I said some episode ago, where I said I would record all my episode with a shark costume, because when I said that it was winter and cold. Now it's warm and I'm gonna melt on the couch, so I will have to ditch the shark costume. Sorry for that. Today I'm here to talk with you about nitrox diving. Now we're gonna see very quickly what it is and why you should actually get nitrox certified. I remember my very first dive with nitrox, and before jumping in the water, I thought I would feel a huge difference, because I learned in the theory everything that changes when you dive with nitrox, all the advantages this mixture has compared to compressed air, but actually you don't feel it. Let me tell you, you just breathe normally like you used to do with compressed air, and what you do notice is what your computer says, because when you were used to do certain deco stops for a certain bottom time, well, this is drastically reduced when you start diving with nitrox. So what it is, first of all, nitrox is a special mixture that divers can use, where instead of having normal air, like this one, so normal compressed air in the tank, they have enriched air, which means we put more oxygen than normal in the tank. Now, usually tanks that we bring underwater have, when they're with compressed air, 21% of oxygen, and the rest is mainly nitrogen. Now, nitrogen we don't really need for breathing or living itself. We need the oxygen, but we are used to a certain amount of nitrogen. Our body is used to a certain amount of nitrogen, and when we dive and the pressure increases, also the amount of nitrogen that will be dissolved into our tissues, in our cells, will increase drastically. And this can lead to several problems. So what we do when we dive with nitrox is we put more than 21% oxygen in our mixture. For example, for normal recreational dives, it's around 32%. And what happens is the amount of nitrogen now in our tank is significantly less than before. If we had 79%, more or less, before with compressed air, now we just have 68%. It doesn't seem much probably as a difference, but trust me, it is, and I'll explain you why. Now, the thing that probably you already heard about is that with nitrox you have much less decompression stops, or time you need to spend in decompression stops when resurfacing. Now, decompression stops in general are stops that we do at a certain depth for a certain amount of time, can be a couple of minutes, can be a bit more, depending how long we were on the bottom, so that we can allow our body to release this extra nitrogen that was compressed in our cells during the dive in a peaceful way, without forming bubbles. The problem of bubbles is that they can clog our blood and can interrupt the blood flow. When this happens, can be dangerous, especially in the brain, so we don't want that. So we do deco stops that allow our body to exhale the nitrogen with all the time we need. Now, when we dive with nitrox, because we have less nitrogen in the tank and in the gas that we're breathing, we also will accumulate much less of it, or less fast, let's say, in our tissues. So that's why when we resurface, we need much less time till we can go to the next level of the deco stop and reach the surface itself. So together with reduced deco stops, of course, it also allows you to reduce decompression sickness risks, because when we dive we have the risk of getting a decompression sickness, so these bubbles in our blood, and this whole problem is minimized by diving with an enriched air mixture, so with nitrox, with something that contains more oxygen and less nitrogen than normal air. One other thing people noticed is when they dive with nitrox, they feel much less the effect of nitrogen narcosis. So because we're diving at a certain depth, and maybe in certain conditions where it's a bit darker or a bit colder, what happens is that our body reacts to the increased amount of nitrogen and we feel drunk, more or less. And this can be funny, but also very dangerous. We make fun of nitrogen narcosis and we make fun of the situations where maybe a body was narked, but it can be actually very dangerous. In a soft case, it can just be that the person has lower reaction. That is not a good thing. If you're diving, you want to make sure that you and your body are both able to react and respond to an emergency in a certain amount of time with the right measures. And of course, in more serious cases, it can be that a person faints or doesn't respond anymore to his body. So it can be very, very dangerous. Nitrogen narcosis is caused by the amount of nitrogen in our brain. And when we dive with nitrox, because we have less nitrogen, then blah, blah, blah. Always the same thing. Less nitrogen is better for the dive itself, for its safety, and you get to dive at a certain depth where you maybe would feel the nitrogen narcosis with compressed air. You don't feel anything with nitrox. So it's actually more safe, not only for the decompression sickness, better for the deco stops, but it's also safer because it reduces nitrogen narcosis. Now, some people say that they feel less tired after the dive when they dive with nitrox. Maybe I would say that too, but there is no proof for it, and actually it has been proven, however, that oxygen itself can have the same narcotic effect than nitrogen. So after the dive, there is no scientific evidence that diving with nitrox reduces fatigue, but some people experience it, and I think it's beautiful. We should leave it like this. If you feel less tired, then it's good like that. Doesn't matter where that is coming from. Because it reduces your deco stops, it also reduces your surface interval times. So you need to wait less time at the surface between dives or before you can go to altitude and so on. So it does have several advantages, but as every cool thing, also diving with nitrox has limitations. So what you need to be aware of is you can maybe dive to 60 meters without problem with compressed air. You cannot do that with nitrox. With nitrox, you have less problems bound to the nitrogen, but you have more problems bound to the oxygen now. Because we have more oxygen, we need to pay attention to not go deeper than a certain depth allowed by the mixture. Let me explain. For safety reasons, we try to keep the partial pressure of oxygen below 1.6 bar. So at the surface with air, where we have 21%, we would have 0.2 bars of oxygen. But as soon as we dive 10 meters and we have now 2 bars of pressure, because every 10 meters of water you have 1 bar more, right? So you have the atmospheric one and then 1 bar for the 10-meter water. You now have 0.4 bar of oxygen as a partial pressure. And now the more you go down, the more this pressure increases. And when it reaches a certain level, it's not safe anymore for our brain. We could get intoxicated by this amount of oxygen. Below 1.6, everything is safe. Above, there is a risk that you will damage your nervous system. So to avoid that, we always stay below this threshold. Now, when you dive with a nitrox 32, we said before, is a very used percentage, you can go maximally to 40 meters. So it works really good for recreational divers because 40 meters is anyway the maximum depth you can go as a recreational diver. So you can dive to your limits, to 40 meters with nitrox 32 and reduce drastically the amount of time you will need to resurface. However, there are certain situations where going a bit deeper could be useful, and this is the beautiful thing about nitrox, is a blend. You can blend it as you want. It's always a compromise between how deep you can go and how much deco you can skip, basically. For example, some time ago I was at the sea in the Mediterranean, Italy, beautiful sea, beautiful corals, but certain corals were just starting from the 40 meters. So a nitrox 32 would have not allowed me to see these corals. So what I did was going with Nitrox, of course, to reduce a bit the deco that I needed to do, but a softer Nitrox. So instead of 32%, I just put 27% in my tank. So you can really arrange it as you want, and it doesn't need to be either 21 or 27 or 32. You can also make it 28.5. You just calculate what your maximum depth will be, and then it will allow you to go a bit deeper or shallower, but with less deco. So you need to find a compromise between these two. You can blend it as you want and just enjoy some advantages of it. Even if it's just slightly more oxygen than compressed air, you're already gonna gain a bit on the decompression. I know many people will never use Nitrox in their life and think that it's a complete useless waste of time doing the Nitrox certification, but I'm gonna try to convince you of the opposite right now. First of all, it's not gonna be so much a waste of time, because if you decide to do Nitrox, you will see it's a specialty, which means you're not going to invest 2 months in it. You're going to have a theory lesson and you're going to do a dive with it. In 1 or 2 days, you have it done. And then you're Nitrox certified, which means you can go with Nitrox. Then, if you like it, you can still go on and you can still decide to make the Nitrox blender certification, which allows you to prepare your own mixtures and blend your own tanks. But you don't have to. You can also get your Nitrox prepared by someone that is allowed to do it and just dive with it. So it's a really small investment you're gonna do that is probably gonna save your holidays. Now I'll tell you a story. I was in the Maldives and I was registering for the dive of the next day. And I asked the guys to tell me a bit what their plan was, where they wanted to go, and then they told me like in the afternoon they had this dive, and in the morning they were going to see tiger sharks in this very special location. It's a new dive site they found just a few years ago, and I tell you, it was amazing. We saw everything. No, not everything. I missed the hammerheads, but I saw lemon sharks, bull sharks, spinner sharks, tiger sharks, guitar sharks, lots of stingrays and other fishes. So you really see much in this dive site and it's really worth it. But I could do it just because I was a Nitrox diver. So they told me for this dive, because it's with big sharks and we want to be super safe, we're just bringing advanced divers. Now, not only advanced divers with Nitrox certification, which means everybody was diving with Nitrox. Why? Because they couldn't afford to spend time in deco stops when tiger sharks were going around with a big group. So we wanted to use all the possible time in our no deco limits on the bottom, seeing the sharks, and not on our resurfacing. So you could have been an instructor, the most skilled guy in the world, but if you didn't have a Nitrox certification, you couldn't go. And trust me, you would have missed an opportunity here. So it doesn't have to already have a purpose tomorrow. If you do the certification, nobody's gonna take it away from you. And you can really just enjoy its benefits. Maybe you will just need it in 5 years, but at least you will have it. So trust me, it's a small investment and I think it's totally worth it. Before registering for the dives, I did my introductory dive, because if you're new to a dive center, of course, for a couple of weeks, they want to see how you dive and decide if you can go independently or you will always need a guide. You know this stuff. So I did my intro dive, and the guy that was diving with me was not Nitrox certified, and he asked me my opinion, and I told him he should do it. From a smile on his face, I hope he was really happy when he came out of Shark Tank the day afterwards. So he really did a course, or maybe it was 2 days afterwards, but he did a course, and then the day after he just could go to see the tiger sharks, and it was definitely worth it. I don't see a reason not to do it, because it is safer, and even if you don't want to spend a bit more for recharging your tanks, which I totally understand, absolutely. But if you need it, then you have it. And I think this is the most important thing. So if you want to make yourself a present, don't wait till you need it. Just go for it. Register, make a Nitrox course, and then you have it. I hope I could help you figuring out why doing a Nitrox certification is a good idea. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. I'm really happy to help you out understanding what is Nitrox about or what you need to do this certification.